and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Qatar says Gaza ceasefire talks in Doha remain in the early stages with no breakthrough yet. Mediators from Qatar, Egypt and the US are still pushing to secure a basic framework agreement. France's foreign minister has announced that a rescheduled United Nations conference this month will focus on post-war plans for Gaza and the recognition of a Palestinian state by France and other nations. The conference, originally planned with Saudi Arabia for 17th to 20th June in New York, now aims to define a roadmap to Palestinian statehood. Meanwhile, French Prime Minister François Bayrou will present a €40 billion budget cut to reduce the deficit to 4.6% of GDP by 2026, amid growing opposition threats to overturn his minority government, according to reports. Germany's top court has dismissed a complaint by Yemeni plaintiffs over U.S. drone strikes, ruling that Berlin is not obligated to intervene in American military operations conducted from Ramstein Air Base. According to reports, the plaintiffs, who lost relatives in 2012 strike, criticized the decisions as dangerous. Ukrainian drone attacks overnight has wounded 18 people and damaged residential and commercial buildings in Russia's Voronezh, Lipetsk and Bryansk regions, with 16 injuries reported in Voronezh alone. Russian defenses intercepted 55 Ukrainian drones across 5 regions, including 12 destroyed over Voronezh, as reported by Governor Alexander Gusev. The Kremlin has dismissed U.S. President Donald Trump's latest warnings to President Putin as misguided, stating they encourage Ukraine to continue the war, while some Russian officials called his moves political theater. According to media reports, Trump threatened 100% tariffs on buyers of Russian exports. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces a crisis after the ultra-Orthodox United Torah Judaism party with 6 members quit his coalition over a military conscription bill, leaving his government with only 1-seat majority in the Knesset, according to reports. Tesla has officially launched in India with the Model Y priced at a premium $70,000 due to steep import tariffs near 100%, while targeting India's niche 4% electric vehicle market in the world's 3rd largest automobile sector. EU Trade Commissioner Markus Šefčovič is set to talk with U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, according to an EU spokesperson. Spokesperson Olof Gill confirmed that the call would take place today and emphasized that the EU has no plans for countermeasures before August 1st, while negotiations are still ongoing. Meanwhile, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has said that the United States should not underestimate the European Union's willingness to respond to Trump's 30% tariffs on EU imports. He confirmed ongoing discussions with U.S. President Donald Trump and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, reiterating the EU's commitment to finding a negotiated solution rather than escalating the trade dispute. He stressed that the goal is to find a quick solution to the tariff dispute and the EU's refraining from countermeasures for now. Here's what the German Chancellor had to say.
Ich habe über das Wochenende mit dafür geworben, dass wir jetzt keine reziproken Zölle in Kraft setzen. Das hätte sonst automatisch schon am gestrigen Tage stattfinden können. Aber bitte, die amerikanische Regierung soll auch nicht unsere Bereitschaft unterschätzen, auf übermäßig hohe Zollbelastungen mit ähnlichen Maßnahmen auch zu reagieren. Wir sind vorbereitet in der Europäischen Union. Wir hoffen aber auf eine Verhandlungslösung und deswegen bin ich auch in dieser Frage so sehr engagiert, gerade auch in der europäischen.
Now, we are joined by John Rossomando for this discussion as President of Viking Research Associates and geopolitical analyst. Thank you, John, for joining us today. Good to see you. What do you think? What are the key issues expected to be discussed in today's call between US and EU about trade? John, could you hear me? May I repeat the question? John. Okay. EU Trade Commissioner Maros Sefcovic is set to talk with the US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, according to an EU spokesperson. Spokesperson Olof Gilk has confirmed that the call would take place today, and he has emphasized that the EU has no plans for countermeasures before August 1st, while negotiations are still ongoing. EU Trade Commissioner Maros Sefcovic is set to talk with US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, according to an EU spokesperson. According to media reports today, as spokesperson Olof Gil has confirmed that the call would take place today, and he has emphasized that the EU has no plans for countermeasures before August 1st, while negotiations are still ongoing. They seem to be optimistic about reaching a trade deal before the deadline of August. And EU Trade Commissioner Maros Sefcovic is set to talk with US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, according to an EU spokesperson. Spokesperson Olof Gil has confirmed that the call would take place today, and he has emphasized that EU has no plans for countermeasures before August 1st deadline. He has emphasized that the EU has no plans for countermeasures before August 1st, while negotiations are ongoing. They have shown optimism, as they have stated that they are holding off on countermeasures until at least August 1st. EU Trade Commissioner Maros Sefcovic is set to talk with US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, according to an EU spokesperson. Spokesperson Olof Gil has confirmed that the call would take place today, and he has emphasized that EU has no plans for countermeasures before August 1st, while negotiations are still ongoing. EU Trade Commissioner Maros Sefcovic is set to talk with US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, according to an EU spokesperson. Spokesperson Olof Gil has confirmed that the call would take place today, and he has emphasized that the EU has no plans for countermeasures before August 1st deadline, while negotiations are still ongoing. EU Trade Commissioner Maros Sefcovic is set to talk with US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, according to an EU spokesperson. Olof Gil has confirmed that the call would take place today, and emphasized that the EU has no plans for countermeasures. Now we move on to our next news. In Moscow, the Kremlin warned that President Trump's pledge of more weapons to Ukraine and threat of harsh tariffs could embolden Kyiv and stall peace efforts. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov called the statement very serious and said Russia needs time to analyze it. He warned Ukraine may view the move as encouragement to keep fighting. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov responded, saying he has no doubt Russia will cope with new sanctions on Trump's motives. Lavrov said Moscow wants to understand what the US president is moved by. Russia said it remains open to talks, but blames Kyiv for delays. Now we stay in the region. According to regional governors, at least 18 people were wounded in the attacks. 16 of them, including a teenager, were injured in the Voronezh region. Governor Alexander Gusev has said that residential buildings, commercial sites, and a kindergarten were damaged. Children are being relocated. In Lipetsk, Governor Igor Artamonov confirmed one injury after a drone crashed in an industrial zone. And in Bryansk, a woman was hurt in a strike on a village, according to Governor Alexander Bogomaz. On the other hand, Russia's Ministry of Defense has said that air defense units shot down 55 drones across 5 regions and the Black Sea, including 12 over Voronezh. The strikes come as Ukraine intensifies long-range operations deep into Russian territory. Now we move on to our next news. In Brussels, Dutch Foreign Minister Casper Veldkamp said the Netherlands is positively considering US President Trump's pledge to send Patriot missiles to Ukraine. He stressed that the Netherlands already plays a key role supplying air defense systems, F-16s, and radar tech. Veldkamp welcomed US-EU unity on Ukraine and urged faster action, saying Trump's 50-day deadline is rather long. He also backed strong US sanctions, calling for pressure on Russia to increase both military and economically. Let's have a look at what the Dutch foreign minister had to say.
That, and we're looking into that with a positive inclination. As you may know, the Netherlands already does a lot, including on air defense, from Patriot missile systems, missile batteries, to F-16s, up to manpads, up to 1.4 billion in drone cooperation between the Netherlands and Ukraine, up to radar systems against incoming drones, etc. We will look into what we can do also in relation to Mr. Trump's announcements and take it from there.
Now we're joined by Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at Hudson Institute, joining us live from Tokyo. Thank you, Doctor, for joining us today. Good to see you. What's your reaction about the 50-day deadline that is, or threat that is set by US? Do you think that is it going to help stop this war in Ukraine, or will it not? What's the chances here?
What President Trump want to do is ending the conflict in the Europe and Middle East and concentrate their effort resources in the Indo-Pacific against China. So that's why he has shown the strong effort to end and seeking the ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. But view from the Europe, this is wasting effort because Putin do not have the will to ceasefire, because in the battlefield, gradually Russia is expanding territory. If the starting point of this war setting up in the 2040 until the 2025, gradually, one by one, step by step, Russia expand territory, and so that's why Russia do not have the will to end this process until they occupy enough amount of the territory, or because of his greedy, it will not end because of his activity. But that is a view from the European side. So President Trump's effort to try to persuade Putin to end the war, still he is try to continue. But at the same time, gradually he is accepting the Europeans' opinion. Putin do not have the will to end this battle. And so that's why, case of the President Trump, if the Trump accept Europeans' opinion, for which Putin do not have the will to end the war, and in this case, of course, President Trump's effort was wasted one, and so that's why this is not comfortable. If so that's why he want to seek at least 15 days to wait Putin's response by increasing the pressure toward Putin. So that's why the 15 days are setting up to the US side. View from the European side, this is wasting time, but view from US side still, he want to get something, the achievement from the negotiation last 6 months. So that is understandable view from the United States, and that is understandable view from the Europe, because the US is accepting the European opinion gradually. Even if the 50 days still exist, but Europeans start to understand change is favorable for Europe. So that's why it has happened, I believe.
And now, how significant is the Netherlands' support for U.S. plans to send Patriot missiles to Ukraine, and what could their expanded role look like?
Netherlands' opinion is one of the representative of the opinion, I think, because of course NATO's chief is currently the former Netherlands Prime Minister, and at the same time, this time President Trump expressed their support to Ukraine by providing the Patriot missile or imposing the new sanction after 50 days. In this case, this has happened when President Trump talked with the chief of the NATO, so former Netherlands Prime Minister. So that's why the Netherlands' opinion is, of course, directly linked with NATO's opinion, and one of the representatives from the European side opinion. So that's why this is a good message and a good front runner to express or support Trump's support to Ukraine, and but at the same time, from the Trump side, of course, what really want to do was ending the war as soon as possible and concentrate the effort to the Indo-Pacific against China. So this is what he want to do, but now he is accepting the reality, and that is unfortunate for the President Trump. Even if the President Trump's policy to support Ukraine is welcome for Europe.
And Dr. Satur, what impact could this stronger U.S. sanctions backed by allies like the EU realistically have on Russia's military and economy at this stage?
Good part is the European side and the US side coordinates effort, means that this is a big power. Collaboration of the two sides create a big power to deter Russia or China or other countries. But at the same time, this fact indicates that the US need to spend some certain resources in Europe and cannot use the same resources against China in the Indo-Pacific or other region. So that's why the strong power created by the Western side integrated forces. But at the same time, view from the US side, US want to concentrate their resources more in the Indo-Pacific. That is also the fact.
Thank you, Dr. Satur Nagao, for staying with us and sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we stay on this topic. In Kyiv, President Volodymyr Zelensky marked Ukraine's statehood day by honoring fallen soldiers at the Wall of Remembrance. Trump's special envoy attended the ceremony. Zelensky said Ukraine is again forced to defend its statehood and independence, warning that the future of Europe is being decided in Ukraine. He said Russian attacks will not stop Ukrainians from standing strong. Zelensky vowed Ukraine will preserve its sovereignty and remain an independent nation, despite continued pressure from Moscow. Let's listen in to the Ukrainian president.
Захищати нашу українську державність, і робимо це. Захищати нашу власну незалежність і звичайну людяність в цій вже не першій війні Росії проти України. Ми захищаємо значно більше, ніж себе і свою державу. Саме тут, в Україні, визначається, якою буде подальша доля Європи. І це не пусті слова, це питання, чи битимуть російські ракети і шахеди по містах інших європейських країн.
Now we go back to our guest discussion with Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at Hudson Institute. Thank you, Doctor, for staying with us. Now, what message is President Zelensky sending by linking Ukraine's history for independence to the future of Ukraine's independence and future of Europe?
This is very important to show the legitimacy of Ukraine. Because Russia believes that, or at least the current Russian government express that Ukraine is a part of their country. There is no there is no country so-called Ukraine, as they said. So that's why Russia denies the legitimacy of Ukraine. That's why Russia refused to say that this invasion, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, is not a war, they said. Do not accept this. It's a war between nation versus nation. But view from Ukraine, this is a very rude attitude from Russia. And Ukraine need to say Ukraine is independent country. And when we check history, Ukraine, for a long time, Ukraine was independent. This was an independent country, not part of Russia, part of something. So that's why this is a battle related to the legitimacy of their country. That is important because especially for Ukraine's sovereignty, I think.
And Doctor, with Trump's special envoy attending the ceremony, does this signal a shift or reaffirmation of U.S. support?
Yes, because last 6 months, the U.S. tried to show the effort to seeking the ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. But at that time, President Trump used two cards. One is because he is a pro-Russia, that's why that is a good chance for Russia to cease the war. This is beneficial for Russia. Another one is because of he is unpredictable person. If the ceasefire negotiation fails, something big risk will come imposed to Russia. That is benefit and cost both suggested by the attitude of the President Trump. But now this U.S. start to accept Russia do not have the will to end this war. So that's why the United States need to show the strong stance against Russia and supporting Ukraine. In this case, firstly is accepting the legitimacy and join this event is a good symbolic gesture or the legal gesture to support Ukraine. Of course, this is not just supporting politically. Of course, the U.S. will provide Patriot missile to Ukraine. So this is a more realistic support. So combined with two, this is powerful. So U.S. will stand with Ukraine is the message President Trump want to show through these ceremonies.
Thank you very much, Dr. Satoru Nagao, for staying with us and sharing your insight all the way from Japan. Now we move on to our next news. China and Australia have signed multiple cooperation agreements on trade, customs, agriculture, and quarantine, marking a fresh push to strengthen economic ties. The deals were sealed as Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese met with Chinese leaders in Beijing. President Xi Jinping praised the turnaround in relations, saying the two countries have risen from past setbacks and should maintain this positive momentum despite global tensions. China's Premier Li also stressed that Beijing and Canberra have vast potential to cooperate in energy, minerals, and agriculture. This marks Albanese's second visit to China as Prime Minister, aimed at boosting trade with Australia's largest partner. The trip comes months after China removed its final trade barriers, including a ban on Australian rock lobster. Both sides say dialogue and mutual respect will be key to a stable relationship. And China and Australia has shown that they're both eager for a good relationship, and they have talked in relations to cooperate on energy, minerals, and agriculture as well. This marks Albanese's second visit to China in this second term, while in his previous term, his first term, he did visit China before, but now in his second term, this was his first visit, and it is aimed at boosting trade with Australia's largest partner. And this trip comes months after China removed its final trade barriers, including a ban on Australian rock lobster, which was part of a big trade or export to China from Australia. And they're gaining positive momentum despite global tensions in geopolitical and they want to maintain this positive momentum despite global tensions. China's Premier Li also stressed that Beijing and Canberra have vast potential to cooperate in energy, minerals, and agriculture. This marks Albanese's second visit to China as Prime Minister, aimed at boosting trade with Australia's largest partner. The trip comes months after China removed its final trade barriers, including a ban on Australian rock lobster. This marked Albanese's second visit to China as Prime Minister. China and Australia have signed multiple cooperation agreements on trade, customs, agriculture, and quarantine, marking a fresh push to strengthen economic ties. The deals were sealed as Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese met with Chinese leaders in Beijing. President Xi Jinping praised the turnaround in their relations, saying the two countries have risen from past setbacks and they should maintain this positive momentum despite global tensions. China's Premier Li also stressed that Beijing and Canberra have vast potential to cooperate in energy, minerals, and agriculture. Now we move on to our next news. China has slammed Japan over comments made in its new defense white paper, which claims Beijing's military activities could pose a serious security threat. Speaking in Beijing, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian said China expresses strong dissatisfaction and firm opposition to Japan's statements. He added that China has lodged formal diplomatic complaints, accusing Tokyo of distorting facts, hyping a China threat, and interfering in China's internal affairs. The white paper marks a continued shift in Japan's defense posture as it voices concerns over Beijing's growing presence in the region. China, however, says its military activities are legitimate and defensive in nature, and warned Japan against provocative moves that could damage regional stability.
日本新版的防务白皮书抱持错误的对华认知，无理干涉中国内政，炒作所谓中国威胁。中方对此表示强烈不满和坚决反对，已向日方提出严正交涉。台湾是中国领土不可分割的一部分，台湾问题纯属中国内政，如何解决台湾问题是中国人自己的事。中国坚持走和平发展道路，奉行防御性国防政策，有关国防建设和军事活动正当合理，同其他国家开展的军事合作符合国际法和国际惯例。
Now we move on to our next news. Qatar says Gaza ceasefire talks are still in their initial phase, despite more than a week of negotiations in Doha. Both Israeli and Hamas delegations remain in the city, with mediators including Qatar, Egypt, and the US intensifying efforts to reach a framework agreement. Qatar's Foreign Ministry spokesman Majid Al-Ansari confirmed discussions are focused on reaching an agreement in principle before moving to more detailed negotiations. Although the talks stalled over the weekend, particularly over Israel's desire to keep troops in Gaza, Qatar insists there is no deadlock. Ansari warned the outcome remains uncertain. A deal could be reached or collapse at any time. He stressed there is no set deadline, adding that efforts will continue for as long as needed to secure a ceasefire agreement between the warring sides. Qatar says Gaza ceasefire talks are still in their initial phase despite more than a week of negotiations in Doha. Both Israeli and Hamas delegations remain in the city, with mediators including Qatar, Egypt, and the US intensifying efforts to reach a framework agreement. Qatar's Foreign Ministry spokesman, Majid Al-Ansari, confirmed discussions are focused on reaching an agreement in principle before moving to more detailed negotiations. Although the talks stalled over the weekend, particularly over Israel's desire to keep troops in Gaza, Qatar insists there is no deadlock. Ansari has warned the outcome remains uncertain. A deal could be reached or collapse any time. He has stressed that there is no set deadline, adding that efforts will continue for as long as needed to secure a ceasefire agreement between warring sides. Qatar says Gaza ceasefire talks are still in their initial phase despite more than a week of negotiations in Doha. Both Israeli and Hamas delegations remain in the city, with mediators including Qatar, Egypt, and the US intensifying efforts to reach a framework agreement. Qatar's Foreign Ministry spokesman Majid Al-Ansari confirmed discussions are focused on reaching an agreement in principle before moving to more detailed negotiations. Although the talks stalled over the weekend, particularly over Israel's desire to keep troops in Gaza, Qatar insists that there is no deadlock. Ansari has warned the outcome remains uncertain. A deal could be reached or collapse at any time. He has stressed there is no set deadline, adding that the efforts will continue for as long as needed to secure a ceasefire agreement. Now we are joined back by Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow from Hudson Institute. Thank you, Dr. Satoru, for staying with us and joining us back. Now, what's your reaction? What do you think can come out or maybe collapse even? Will this ceasefire talk, is it going anywhere? Is it not going anywhere? What can we maybe guess on any outcome soon or not?
Since October 7th, 2023, the terrorist attack has happened by Hamas. That time, Israel cannot trust Hamas. And that's why this looks like zero-sum. Because Israel side want Hamas to eliminate it, exterminate it. Hamas side, Hamas try to survive. So, if the two sides try to negotiate, this is zero-sum negotiate. Zero or sum only exists, survive or not, can Hamas survive or not, is the only matter. So just United States try to arrange the mediation, between two on 6 days ceasefire and half of the hostage return from Hamas to Israel. That is just between two. But this ceasefire do not indicate it that both sides can agree or accept their wish, because the Israel side, this 60 days, 6 days means that Hamas can survive 60 days. After that, they do not want the Hamas to survive. And 6 days later, Hamas want to survive, but Israel cannot live with Hamas. So that's why this is zero sum. So even if the ceasefire negotiation arranged by the United States indeed continue to suggest this same content ceasefire from the United States, but both sides do not accept this kind of ceasefire so easily because this is zero-sum negotiation. So 60 days, temporarily, it could happen, but this is not the meaning of the ending this battle.
And Doctor, what roles are Qatar and Egypt and the United States playing as a mediator right now? What is their significant role, particularly for Qatar and Egypt to be in Qatar discussing towards the ceasefire?
Firstly, focusing on Egypt. Indeed, originally Hamas was an organization located inside of the Egypt, and Egypt pushed them out from their country. So that's why, view from the Egypt, situation in Gaza is not good, or the people in Gaza should not be killed by the attack. But at the same time, this Hamas is not welcome for Egypt. That's why the battle has happened. Border between Gaza and Egypt was closed. So, view from Egypt, Hamas is not welcome. But Israel continued military operation against Hamas has some collateral damage. This is not comfortable for the Egypt too. So that is the stance of the Egypt. In case of Qatar, a little bit different, I think. In case of Qatar shows many mediation between the two sides, two parties. Afghanistan, Taliban and United States, or Iran and Saudi Arabia, or now Israel and Hamas. So Qatar want to show the diplomatic skill and showing the presence in the international community. That is Qatar's arrangement, Qatar's diplomacy, and Qatar's presence. So, of course, they worry about situation people in Gaza, but at the same time, this diplomatic achievement is very attractive for Qatar, I think. So that's why each party has each interest. And combined with this, will the ceasefire continue? Will ceasefire really work? But that is rely on how to arrange many interests in this region. Very complicated negotiation. But the most core point of this ceasefire negotiation is, indeed, Israel and Hamas, this is zero-sum negotiation. It is not agreeable indeed. That is very important part, I think.
Thank you very much, Dr. Satoru, for joining us today and staying with us throughout our news. Now we have a breaking news. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says U.S.-China trade talks are in a very good place. According to reports, he also suggested that the deadline for the current tariff truce set to expire next month could be flexible. His remarks signal a possible extension as both sides work towards a longer-term trade solution. The update comes amid renewed global focus on U.S.-China economic ties and growing hopes that fresh tariffs can be avoided through continued negotiations. Now we are joined by Suresh Goyal. He's a former diplomat joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you, Suresh, for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. How are both sides approaching the goal of reaching a long-term trade solution amid ongoing negotiations, according to you?
You're talking about...
China and U.S., yes.
U.S.-China?
Yes, yes.
Well, given the present climate of negotiations which are taking place and the trend that has developed so far, I think the negotiations between China and the USA are not just about trade. Trade, of course, is right in the forefront, which is actually showing the quality of the relationship between the two countries. But I think it's beyond the trade really. It is a power contest between China and the USA. And my own impression is that even though Trump may be willing to really find accommodation with China on the trade, if he can find a balance between the two really, and he can find some kind of a solution for tariff. But there are so many issues involved in the trade basket, which involve like the rare earth metals, it involves steel, it involves various material, the autos technology, then the basically technology, and also the suspicions of the Chinese intrusion through the exported components. I don't really think that a solution to the trade issues between China and the USA are going to be very easy or even possible in the near term.
And Suresh, what did U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent particularly say about the current status of U.S.-China trade talks?
I'm sorry, I have not seen the report of what she said about the current status of the talk.
No problem. I can move on to next question then.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. What information is available regarding the deadline for the current tariff truce between US and China?
Current territories?
Current tariff truce.
Tariff rates?
Yeah.
Well, China had accepted earlier the tariff rate to be reduced to 30%, but even with the acceptance of that reduction of tariff to 30%, there are issues involved here which may not be so easily amenable. China, in fact, had given an indication even after 30% tariff that there will be problems in terms of really the trade volumes and the quotas, the non-tariff barriers that the USA is linking it to various kinds of technology barriers. So even the tariffs were acceptable, that 30%, but that was not the end of it really.
Thank you very much, Suresh Goel, for joining us today and sharing your insight as a formal diplomat. Now we move on to our next news. Syria's defense minister has announced a ceasefire in the Druze majority city of Sueda after days of intense clashes. Fighting has broke out as Syrian troops moved into the city, which had been under the control of local Druze factions. The government said the ceasefire followed an agreement with city notables though Druze leaders remain divided. A Druze spiritual leader accused Damascus of breaking an earlier truce and called for fighters to resist. He labeled the military offensive a war of extermination. Meanwhile, Israel has confirmed strikes on Syrian tanks near Sueda, warning Damascus not to target Druze areas or expand its military presence to south. The violence began after a Druze civilian was kidnapped by Bedouin gunmen. Over 100 people have been killed in the fighting, including Druze civilians, Bedouin fighters, and security forces. The new Syrian government under President Ahmad al-Sharaa is struggling to contain the escalation. Now we're joined by our guest for this discussion, Scott Faulkner. He's the head of Eagle Enterprises. It's a security firm, joining us live from Washington. Thank you, Scott, for joining us today. Good to see you. What does the Thank you. What does this newly declared ceasefire in Sueda reveal about the Syrian government's approach and its power of control with Druze majority regions amid factions within the country?
Well, first and foremost, the entire Middle East is filled with all these minorities because it's a tribe. You start to look at different national boundaries, which are already in the case of the Syrian government. They're trying to consolidate power, but also the world is watching because just recently we've got the Dubai ports World deal to finally do some major economic development in Syria. So I think the Syrian government is walking a tightrope because on one front, they would like to consolidate power. On the other, if they do it brutally, deals like the Dubai ports could end. And so they are really having to look at the fact that if you're going to consolidate power, better to include people in a government instead of trying to kill them off.
Yes, and what are the implications of Israel's confirmed strikes and warnings? And how does this reflect regional concern over Syria's military actions near Druze-populated areas?
Well, the Druze have traditionally been allies of Israel, especially in southern Lebanon. Israel is very protective of the Druze. The city involved is only like 30 kilometers from the Golan Heights. So Israel definitely wants to make sure that these traditional allies of theirs are not, are not destroyed. And it gets back to, again, these signals that are occurring so that the Syrian government should really be looking at how best to engage these minorities instead of trying to fire at them.
Thank you very much, Scott, for joining us today and sharing your insight. Please stay with us as we stay on the region. In Turkey, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's government is facing growing scrutiny over a sweeping crackdown on political rivals from the main opposition JHP party. A Reuters investigation has revealed that more than 500 individuals, including 14 elected mayors and over 200 local officials, have been detained since October in a corruption probe that critics call politically motivated. The probe has so far targeted only municipalities governed by the secularist JHP, including Istanbul and other key cities that dealt Erdogan a major electoral blow in last year's local elections. Istanbul's Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu, Erdogan's chief political rival, is among those jailed, pending trial. He remains a leading presidential contender despite being behind the bars. As the crackdown spreads to more cities, fears are rising that Turkey's democratic institutions are being eroded ahead of potential early elections. The JHP, once largely spared in past purges, now finds itself at the center of what party leaders describe as a judicial coup aimed at silencing opposition. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Scott Faulkner. He's the head of Eagle Enterprises. Thank you, Scott, for staying with us. Now, what details has the Reuters investigation uncovered about the scale and focus of this corruption probe targeting opposition party in Turkey?
Well, once again, we're dealing with a highly centralized government. We're dealing, in the case of Erdogan, with someone his brutality is really knows no bounds. And so it's sad because Turkey is a member of NATO. At one point, it aspired to be part of even the European Union, and it continues to act as a third world thuggery. It's just very sad that again, Erdogan is a dictator, and he's going to do everything he can to undermine what used to be a very vibrant democracy in the area. So it's sad all around.
And Scott, how have Turkish authorities justified these detentions and arrests of these opposition JHP leaders?
Well, their position is very superficial and disingenuous, and they are basically saying they pose a threat to the national security of Turkey. But in fact, Turkey has turned its back on a vibrant democracy, which is for Turkey, sad for the region, certainly sad for the Turkish people.
Thank you, Scott, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we stay in the region. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition government has plunged into crisis after the ultra-Orthodox United Torah Judaism party quit over a long-standing dispute on military service exemptions for Yeshiva students. 6 out of the 7 remaining UTJ lawmakers resigned, following party chief Yitzhak Goldknopf's earlier exit. The move reduces Netanyahu's coalition to a razor-thin majority of just 61 seats in the 120-member Knesset. UTJ says the government failed to honor its commitment to protect the exemption status of seminary students, a core demand of the ultra-Orthodox bloc when it joined the coalition in 2022. It remains unclear whether the other key ultra-Orthodox party, Shas, will also walk out, but pressure is mounting. The issue of military conscription has become even more contentious amid Israel's ongoing war in Gaza. Last year, Israel's Supreme Court ruled that the long-standing exemption for ultra-Orthodox students must end, ordering the Defense Ministry to begin drafting them. Netanyahu had been pushing hard for a compromise conscription bill, but mounting divisions have now triggered a major political rift that could endanger the stability of his own government. Now we go to our discussion for this topic with Scott Faulkner. Thank you, Scott, for staying with us. What reasons are known for the United Torah Judaism party for quitting or giving up on Prime Minister Netanyahu's coalition government?
Well, this minority party has obviously being ultra-Orthodox. They really are passive, and to have their adherent drafted from goes against their core. Happened just like with pacifists in America back during our Vietnam War. They could be in the medical corps, they could do desk jobs, they could do other things there. So I think that the Prime Minister of Israel is trying to find a way out, because on one front, he desperately needs additional military resources in order to continue what's happening in the Gaza Strip, among other places. On the other front, he also has a court ruling that he has to adhere to, because Israel still runs under the rule of law. So hopefully these negotiations to say, okay, you can be in support roles or other kinds of things, will thread the needle on this. But it is, given how close the current majority government in Israel is to collapse, because if another party bails, you could force elections at a very time when a lot of things are in motion in that region. So it's Netanyahu has really got a challenge ahead of him here.
Thank you very much, Scott Faulkner, for joining us and sharing your insight as head of Eagle Enterprises, a security firm. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next segment. Let's take a look at some stories from the world of sports. Flag football will make its Olympic debut at the 2028 Los Angeles Games, with men's and women's medal matches set for prime time at BMO Stadium. The IFAF and NFL has confirmed NFL players can participate, aiming to create iconic moments and bring Friday Night Lights energy to the games. Organizers say the sports inclusion will be a defining element for LA 28's success. Ben Healy becomes first Irishman in 38 years to don the yellow jersey at the Tour de France after finishing third in stage 10. Britain's Simon Yates won the stage with late solo attack, while Healy now leads defending champion Jay Pogacar by 29 seconds going into the rest day. Scotland's Oscar Onley has made a strong impression in his first week at the Tour de France, holding 7th place overall after 10 stages at just 22 years old. The Kelso-born rider turned heads with standout rides finishing 3rd and 4th on stages 4 and 7, staying right behind defending champion Tadej Pogacar and 2-time winner Jonas Vingegaard. Australia's teen opener Sam Constance faces an uncertain future after a dismissal tour of the West Indies, where he scored just 50 runs in 6 innings as Australia completed a 3-0 whitewash. With the Ashes series against England just 4 months away, selectors hope the 19-year-old can regain form at home to fill the void left by David Warner. Paula Badosa will miss several weeks after suffering another back injury, putting her US Open hopes in doubt. The world number 10, who fought back into the top 10 rankings after previous injuries, reveals she has torn her PSOAS muscle following her first round Wimbledon exit to Katie Boulter. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.